Retail sales surge while there are signs the labour market is slowing. Can Taylor Swift save the Australian economy from a recession? And even the King of England is worried about the cost of living. It's Friday, the 30th of June, 2023. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning. Great intro, Michael. Great intro.
Did you ever think there would be a day where we would be talking about both Taylor Swift and King Charles in the intro to Fear and Greed?
No, I didn't. That's very true. But she's a queen of pop, I suppose. So there's some sort of link, maybe.
It's like you're clutching at straws a little bit there,
absolutely.
Sean. After the show, you've got an interview coming up. This is interesting stuff. Paul Weingarth is your guest. He's the co-founder and CEO of Slip.
Yes, so all about smart receipts. So the big four banks have backed Slip, S-L-Y-P, the fintech, to produce electronic receipts for purchases that are actually attached to transactions in your bank account. So rather than having all these paper receipts that inevitably you lose or they fade, you'll actually always have a record on your bank statement. It's a really fascinating little story.
It means you really have no need to carry a wallet or anything ever again, because you will never be accumulating those little slips of paper.
That's right.
Oh, it's a really interesting interview, and I particularly enjoy hearing about how they got kind of the banks on board for this, because that would just be the biggest challenge. But stick around for that. It's coming up a little bit later on. The main story this morning, Sean, retail sales jumped in May as shoppers took advantage of sales, but market watchers say it's a one-off, and households are actually cutting back spending due to higher interest rates.
Retail sales last month jumped by 0.7%, way above expectations, and certainly much more than the flat growth we saw in April. It was a surprise given recent readings and all the anecdotal news coming from retailers. Now, it's worth keeping in mind that the pace of retail growth is still less than the pace of inflation. So while values are rising, volumes are actually falling. During May, there was a jump in newspaper and books retailing. One for you, Michael. Jump in books retailing. That might have been me buying your book, potentially.
Oh, which book's that? Sorry. Sure. No, keep going. I'm not going to do this again. Please keep going.
You will. Later on. There's also a jump in recreational goods sales, pharmaceuticals and cosmetics, big rise in eating out. But there were falls in clothing and soft goods and in department store sales. Interesting number to get this blip when we know households aren't spending as much at the moment.
Yeah, and there were Bureau of Statistics job vacancy figures out yesterday as well.
Yeah, very interesting. Quarterly vacancies fell by 2% over the 3 months to May. They're down by 10% from a year ago, which is also in line with other labour market indicators that have shown a slowing in business hiring intentions and job advertisements. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because we know that the Reserve Bank thinks the unemployment rate needs to go up to take pressure off wage rises, take pressure off inflation, and take pressure off interest rate hikes. The ratio of job vacancies to the number of people unemployed has fallen to 0.84% from a high of 0.95% in June 2022. That was when there was almost as many people unemployed as there were jobs, unheard of in most major economies. Back to 0.84, still pretty high though. That, of course, still keeps pressure on wages.
Sean, we've had a fair bit of economic news this week. I suppose if you kind of chuck it all into the Mixmaster, or
I like it,
the KitchenAid or the Sunbeam or whatever it is that you use. Yeah, the Thermomix, even if you want to get kind of high tech. Whack it all into the Thermomix. We've got an interest rate decision next week. Where do we stand?
Well, it's very much a judgment call from the Reserve Bank. There are signs that inflation is slowing. Household consumption is slowing, notwithstanding yesterday's figures. But there are wages pressures. So I don't have an answer for you. But, Michael, it is June 30. It is the end of the fiscal year. And I think, fiscal year 2023 will forever be known as the year of interest rate rises. The cash rate went from 0.85% on the 1st of July last year to 4.1% on the 30th of June today. That is the fastest increase on record.
It's not exactly a record we wanted to set, is it?
No, No, I don't think so.
All right. How did local markets perform yesterday, Sean?
The S&P ASX 200 closed down just a touch, 2 points to 7,195 points. The market jumped on opening and then spent the day falling back to where it started. The tech stocks did best while utilities were worst. Among the large caps, BHP and Rio Tinto were both off more than 1%. ANZ, Aristocrat Leisure and Brambles all went about the same amount, 1% the other way. They were all positive. WiseTech Global jumped 2.2%. REA Group was nearly 3% higher. Best on the day was Domain Holdings, up more than 5%. Worst was Bega Cheese, down about 6%.
And international markets?
Well, look, it's worth taking a look at Apple because it hit yet another record high yesterday. The company is now worth $2.98 trillion US dollars. That's about 4 trillion Aussie dollars, which, as we've discussed before, is much more than the value of the whole Australian superannuation sector. Investors still think it has a way to run thanks to the virtual reality headsets it launched recently. Tesla's another one, which is nowhere near as big. It's about US $800 billion. That's about a third the size of the local housing market. But it has also had a great year. And of course, there's chipmaker NVIDIA. It's up nearly 200% this year, worth more than 1 trillion US dollars. So half the size of the housing market. Those US tech stocks just keep getting bigger and bigger. Pretty remarkable. In commodity markets, oil prices are lower, as are gold prices. The Aussie dollar has also fallen, seemingly caught up in the debate about higher interest rates in the US and Australia.
All right, there's a bit going on. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, former New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian will not face criminal charges despite engaging in corrupt conduct and breaching the public trust following the release of a 3-year review by the state's corruption watchdog.
The New South Wales Independent Commission Against Corruption found that the then Premier should have disclosed her relationship, which ran for up to 5 years, with former Wagga Wagga Liberal MP Darryl Maguire. ICAC said the relationship posed a serious conflict of interest. The Commission also took exception to Berejiklian's failure to flag concern about Maguire's conduct when it appeared he could be corrupt. It was also scathing of her decision to award a series of grants to regional arts and sporting clubs in Maguire's electorate without disclosing the relationship. After the release of the report, Berejiklian said it had done nothing to demonstrate that she had not acted in the public interest. She also said her lawyers are taking a close look at it. There were a number of state Liberal MPs yesterday who came out and spoke in support of Berejiklian. She, of course, is the third New South Wales Premier to be felled by the state's corruption watchdog. Nick Greiner went in 1992, who stepped down after accusations he misused his position. Barry O'Farrell stepped down in 2014. He misled the Commission over a gifted bottle of Grange Hermitage wine. Now, yesterday, ICAC stopped short of recommending Berejiklian's case be referred to the state's lawyers for prosecution, but she certainly got a fair whack.
Yeah, certainly did. What about, though, Darryl Maguire, who Berejiklian was in a close personal relationship with?
Yes. ICAC was much harsher on Maguire, finding that he committed misconduct in public office by using his position to advance property deals and a visa scheme, and for misusing his parliamentary roles as an MP and as the chairman of the Parliamentary Asia-Pacific Friendship Group to advance his own financial interests and those of his associates. ICAC has recommended that the Department of Public Prosecution consider criminal charges against him.
All right, switching to the federal level now, Sean. Australia is ready to provide an ongoing security presence in Solomon Islands if requested.
Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister Richard Marles, speaking from Honiara, said Australia is committed to security in the region. He said the Solomon Islands is due to hold the Pacific Games in November and elections next April, and a peaceful environment is critical for both events. Now, earlier in the week, Solomon Islands Prime Minister Manasseh Sagavare issued a statement after a meeting with Marles calling for a review of the current security treaty between the two countries to take into account the changing security challenges faced by both countries. When Marles was asked yesterday about that and whether he'd been given any warning from Sagavare about the release, he simply said no.
Now, Sean, toll road group Transurban wants to buy a majority stake in Melbourne's Eastlink toll road operator Horizon Roads, but the competition watchdog is concerned that if it gives the okay, Transurban will have too much power.
Yes, so the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission is concerned that Transurban's dominance will become entrenched and future bidders for toll roads will basically just not try when they come up against Transurban. There have already been reports that bidders for toll roads in Australia have been put off by Transurban's dominance, and that's what's worrying the ACCC. Now, it might be around accessing finance or the cost of finance. It might be around being able to better model traffic flows and understand the value of these toll roads. The good news for Transurban is that some of the other concerns were waved through, with the ACCC saying Victorian state regulations governing pricing prevents any lessening of competition in tolls charged and services provided.
The head of gold and copper group, Newcrest, says the mining sector must overhaul its reputation and leadership style if it's to dig out enough minerals for climate targets to be reached.
Interesting. The industry also needs to work with government to quicken approvals, with bureaucratic under-resourcing a problem. That's according to Newcrest Interim Chief Executive Sherry Dew. She was talking at the World Mining Congress in Brisbane yesterday. She said projections show meeting demand for metals required for decarbonisation means the world needs more copper in the next 27 years than it's mined in the last 125 years plus. That's according to a report in the Financial Review. That basically means deeper and bigger mines. Also at the conference was Treasurer Jim Chalmers. He said mining is a critical source of national wealth, a force for good. I like that one. He also said the government needs to work with the sector, though the two won't always agree on everything.
That's interesting, isn't it? The head of a large company like Newcrest calling on larger bureaucracy, arguing in favour of bigger government. That's a bit topsy-turvy, isn't it?
Yes, I hadn't thought of it that way. She didn't. She's talking about bureaucratic under-resourcing. Maybe she wants more efficient bureaucracy.
Maybe. I'm a bit of a deep thinker today, Sean.
You are. This next story will stop that.
Oh, good. Excellent. Going down a rabbit hole. Let's go down a different one altogether. Air New Zealand is adding flights between Wellington, Christchurch and Auckland to Sydney and Melbourne to cater for the Swift surge, Sean.
That is the Taylor Swift surge. The announcement of Swift's tour dates led to a big jump in demand from New Zealand for trips to Australia. In fact, there's more than 3,500 bookings coinciding with her tour dates. Now, there are more tickets out today, and Air New Zealand expects yet another surge. The local tour dates are February 16 to 25, 3 shows in Sydney, 2 in Melbourne. Not sure whether you've got your tickets yet, Michael. I haven't.
I tell you what, I spent quite a bit of time on the Ticketek website the other day, and I was wondering why it was crashing. I was trying to buy tickets to like the school's concert, our local school concert, which tickets went on sale at 10 a.m. the same day as Taylor Swift. Tickets went on. I'm like, I don't think anyone checked the calendar when this one went on. So, like, what is going on? Why does this site keep crashing? And then I had my answer.
Yours probably won't sell out. Actually, that's not true. The school's concert does sell out.
I know.
It's quite
and
amazing.
the pressure is quite extreme.
Yeah.
And suddenly all the Facebook groups for the school kind of light up with, is everyone else having problems getting on to Ticketek to buy this? And they sold out in an instant. So beat that, Taylor.
Yeah. Take that. Now, you do know there's been a lot of talk about a Swift-led boost to consumer confidence and spending, just as a full impact of higher interest rates is hitting. In fact, a few economists have talked about it, but I loved AMP economist Diana Messina's comment saying, the economy will be slowing, interest rates will be hitting early next year, then Taylor arrives. Her comment was, if Taylor Swift can prevent an Australian recession, then she's an even bigger queen than I thought.
That's fantastic, isn't it? Anyway, yeah. I'm sure, Sean, this will not be the last Taylor Swift story we have.
No, I'm sure it won't be.
Now, from Taylor Swift to Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell.
Very similar.
What a transition, huh? We're obviously now into international news, and we had Jerome Powell telling the ECB Forum on central banking that more rate hikes are coming this year for the world's largest economy.
Do you reckon Taylor Swift would be interested in this story?
I reckon she would, because she does seem like a very, very savvy business person.
That is very true. She's clearly very switched on. She'd be interested in interest rates. Probably cost of living pressures wouldn't worry her so much.
We'll wait for the story we've got coming up a little bit later on, Sean.
Anyway, Jerome Powell, he also said he wouldn't take consecutive rate hikes off the table. Now, Powell wasn't alone in his predictions. The head of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, and the Bank of England Governor, Andrew Bailey, both said they had a way to go to rein in inflation, which is still too high. The odd person out at the meeting was the head of the Central Bank of Japan, who said rates are on hold in the world's third largest economy. All in all, bad news all around. And it's also part of the reason we mentioned that the Aussie dollar is getting caught in this whole interest rate debate. The fact that these big economies are going to lift rates, that's hurting the Aussie dollar.
Sean, human remains have likely been recovered from the wreckage of the submersible that imploded during an underwater voyage to view the Titanic. This is according to the US Coast Guard.
The news came hours after the announcement that debris from the Titan, collected from the seafloor more than 3,600 metres below the surface of the North Atlantic, had arrived in St John's, Newfoundland. Recovering and scrutinising the wreckage is a key part of the investigation into why the Titan imploded last week, killing all 5 people on board. The presumed human remains will be taken to the US. Medical professionals will conduct a formal analysis, and we will hear more about it.
Yeah, we certainly will. All right, last one, Sean, and we kind of mentioned this at the beginning of the show and also just before with Taylor Swift, but the rising cost of living is hitting everyone, maybe not Taylor, but it is hitting the King of England, with Charles ordering the heating in royal homes to be turned down to cut emissions.
Yeah, so the annual Sovereign Grant Report, which details the royals' taxpayer-funded spending and income, detailed that the Crown Estate, that's the London property portfolio belonging to the monarchy, had fallen by £500 million to £7.2 billion, according to Reuters. Now, this was driven by a drop in the value of retail space as consumers tighten their belts due to the rising cost of living. About 20% of the Crown Estate's properties are vacant or unoccupied. So the King's really feeling the pinch here. 20%. Unoccupied. Ouch. The report also said that the King said thermostats should be turned down to 19 degrees to cut greenhouse gas emissions in keeping with his long-term environmental campaigning.
All right. Well, it certainly has been a varied show today, Sean. Up next, you have a really good interview with Paul Weingarth, the co-founder and CEO of Slip, SLYP.
Yes, all about receipts, dockets from purchasing products and how Slip, it's a fintech being backed by the big 4 banks, is trying to get to the point where you will actually get those receipts electronically attached to your bank statements. Fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Sean, do you know what we haven't had all week this week?
Oh, EMEA, I bet you're about to say.
I am about to say EMEA. Thank you for guessing correctly. The Most Enthusiastic Advocate, MEA. And the MEA this week is a listener by the name of Sally. Mm-hmm. And Sally is a daily listener to Fear and Greed, a weekly listener to How Do They Afford That, which is our sister podcast. I am led to believe that Sally has also read a certain novel that's out there at the moment that I promised I will not mention. And I believe she also listens to the Weekend Edition, which is coming up tomorrow.
Fantastic.
It's a very competitive show, that one, and so definitely worth a listen. If you haven't listened to it before, we pick out the biggest story of the week and the sleeper story and the most remarkable story and our favourite story, and it's all judged by a very subjective, slightly kind of biased judge, so it's well worth a listen. Just if you like listening to injustice playing out live in your ears, listen to the Weekend Edition tomorrow morning. But anyway, Sally, thank you very much for listening. We understand that you've been listening to Fear and Greed while at home recovering from back surgery, so we hope you are back up on your feet and back in the office again soon. Thank you very much for being a long-term listener to Fear and Greed. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Friday, the 30th of June, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and stay up to date on all the business news with Alexa and your Amazon Echo smart speaker. Simply say, Alexa, play the Fear and Greed podcast to catch the latest episode. You can get yours now at amazon.com.au. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.